Well, it's unfortunate that we use that term because it is an academic term that confuses people. I don't like the term, but really what it's about is about the various government capitalist policies that have been used to maximize the incomes of the wealthiest 1% and their institutions, the corporations, the banks, and so forth. You know, how have they done this massive income redistribution and income inequality? How has it been pulled off?
Hello.
You know, that's really the question. How has it been pulled off? Well, you got to look at what's called monetary policy. In other words, the central bank and its interest rates and how it gives trillions of dollars to banks and big businesses. You know, they've just done it again, $3 trillion since March. That's part of it. Also, fiscal policy. You know, why is it since George W. Bush we've given $15 trillion in tax cuts to businesses and corporations and investors? You know, how did that happen? Also, industrial policy. Why have the unions been destroyed, and what's been the consequence of that? And why are pensions almost non-existent anymore? Why is the minimum wage not rising, etc.? And then finally, trade policy, which is a little bit more complex, you know, global, which is really all about how the U.S. capitalists keep their competitors and economic allies in line and make sure that they remain, the dominant force globally here, using the U.S. dollar and the international payment systems and all the other tools they have. So those four areas, fiscal, monetary, industrial, trade, are really the tools that the wealthy 1% and their paid-for politicians use to extract more and more wealth from the rest of us for themselves and also from their competitors around the world, and to make sure the American economic empire remains dominant. You know, so it's neoliberalism really is about policies, you see, and about the people it benefits and how they pull them off. And the objective is to redistribute income to the wealthy. It's not about these academic ideas, you know, about the efficient markets and all that other nonsense, you know. So I wrote this book, even though I don't like the term neoliberalism. You know, we used to call what's called neoliberalism, we used to call it, class conflict and class struggle.
That sounds more relatable, actually.
Yeah, and imperialism on the international stage. So what's class struggle and imperialism we used to call, the academics sort of obfuscate, cover it up, and call it neoliberalism, you know. That's why I don't like it.
Sounds nicer.
Yeah, and that's why I wrote this book, to try to clarify what it's really about.
All right, that voice you heard right there is my guest, Dr. Jack Rasmus. He's a PhD in political economy. He teaches economics at St. Mary's College, just over the hill from here. He's the author and producer of the various nonfiction and fictional works, including the books The Scourge of Neoliberalism, U.S. Economic Policy from Reagan to Bush, Alexander Hamilton and the Origins of the Fed. I want to ask him more about Alexander Hamilton. You know what? This man's resume is too long to try to read. Even the brief one he puts on his website is still like a page long. So let's introduce the man you heard there on that video that I've been sharing all over the internet, Dr. Jack Rasmus. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening.
How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good, considering.
Do you like hearing your voice with a soundtrack behind it?
Oh, well, you're not the first or the last.
Okay.
I dig your music. It's pretty good.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. A lot has happened since we last spoke. When we last spoke, it was early October. Mm-hmm. So maybe mid-October, and there was a lot of questions in the air about what the administration was going to do, the Trump administration was going to do. What are we seeing right now with the current Trump administration and what they're trying to do? Is there a coup in the works?
Well, Secretary of State Pompeo just came out, I think it was today.
Yeah.
Yesterday, he came out and said that, the transition is going well for a second term of Trump. No, literally, he said that. He said,
yeah,
which reveals what they're thinking, which means they have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't chaotic. This isn't Trump just sitting up on the second floor of the White House tweeting away. There's a plan, and the first part of the plan was to terrify the Republicans, keep them from coming out and saying, "Okay, so Biden won." He's terrifying them. He's calling them all up. He's threatening them. If you come out and say anything except supporting me, next time around you run in a primary, I'll turn my troops loose on you. I'm going to sick them on you. And, we're going to dump you like we've dumped many others. I have control of the grassroots of the party,
mm-hmm.
and we'll punish you. So they're all hiding. That's all part of it.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of it is they are filing all of their legal briefs and charges and so forth with the intent of going to the Supreme Court at some point. And their strategy is to simply negate the vote in Pennsylvania,
mm-hmm.
those 20 electoral votes, and get those null and void so they don't go to anybody. And then he'll have recounts and revotes in North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona, and he hopes to put himself over with that. So it's the same strategy pretty much that I've been warning about for months, that he was going to use the legal system and ultimately the Supreme Court to pull off a kind of a legal coup in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
What is a coup? It's when you overthrow elected government, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what he's attempting to do right now. So the next 70 days, it's been 7 days from the election, but 70 days to go until January 20th. And a lot could happen and probably will happen between now and then. And, all the euphoria of people out in the streets, they think, Biden won, whether you think
mm-hmm.
he's going to change a lot or not. They nonetheless feel that he's won, and they're in the streets and so forth. But watch out. The next move is going to be Trump trying to create the impression that there is no winner here, and he's going to call his troops to Washington, D.C. in a demonstration there. It'll be interesting to see how many really turn out and what the responses to that really are. And at the same time, you've got the mainstream media, which is pretty much pro-Trump. The mainstream media is out there kind of freezing him out,
Mm-hmm.
They're not giving him much attention at all, not giving him any airtime at all. And, they're not even saying too much about his tweets, except when he sticks his foot in his mouth. So, they do give him some airtime because he has a habit of doing that. So, they're freezing him out, and Biden's coming out and trying to look presidential, and they're getting the heads of Europe governments to acknowledge he's the new president-elect. And it's a battle now for public opinion, because which way public opinion swings, it will have some effect on the Supreme Court for sure.
So I want to stick with the whole Trump, the Trump's narrative right now. You sent me something you wrote, basically explaining why 70 million people during a pandemic, during this economic downturn, would still vote for Donald Trump. And if you don't mind, I wanted to read a little bit from it. Oh God, now I just lost it. Damn it. I had it up and now I can't find it. Of course, that would happen to me right when I'm on air. Media pundits and others have been deeply perplexed as to why so many Americans in this election, 70 million in fact, nonetheless voted for Trump. But it's not all that difficult to understand. There are three major explanations. one economic, one health, and the third most important, a matter of culture and racism manipulated by clever politicians for the past quarter century at least. The first explanation, economics, is that the red states, Trump's base, did not suffer as much economically from the recession as have and are the blue states and big urban areas. And that's a big thing that people aren't really talking about, right? That California definitely is suffering, right? We're seeing a lot of people losing their places, even with that moratorium that really wasn't a forgiveness of rent or mortgages. But in these red states, because people are more spread out, they're not as densely populated, people can see the pandemic as not as big of a deal. Is that what you were getting at?
Yeah, it's not as obvious to a lot of people in rural, small town America until recently in the last month or so, it's began to really impact red state, small town America, especially up in the Midwest. Up there, Wisconsin and Missouri and some places like that. But that came kind of late. The surge up there is kind of late, and people had their minds kind of made up and were already voting. So the pandemic itself had a greater relative negative impact on the big cities. It hit New York heavily, and then California and Seattle and Chicago and places like that. And it was like an imbalance in terms of the relative impact. So to those folks, it wasn't as serious. Those folks meaning red state, flyover, America, small town, rural, small business, evangelical, that whole description, which is a big part of the United States. It didn't hit as hard, and the economy. When I say relatively not as serious an impact, the recession that we're in, it was the blue states and the big cities and Democratic strongholds that really shut down for quite some time, and then opened very slowly, and still opening slowly, and coming back and opening slowly, and so forth, because that's where the pandemic was the worst, and the economic impact from those shutdowns were much greater once again in the blue states, because the red states, some of them hardly shut down at all. We had the big fear there in end of March, April, and for example, Florida shut down for about 3 weeks. And then by late April, early May, they were opening up again, where you have these Republican governors, who are pretty much lockstep with Trump, and Trump pretty much saying, he said it, it's documented, we're going to open this country no matter what, back in April, open the economy rather, back in April, and they did. But, these same red state Americans got the benefit of the bailout. They too got the $1,200 checks, and of course it costs far less for rent in Tupelo, Mississippi, than it does in Bay Area or New York, right?
Yes.
They saved a lot. Their unemployment checks in many cases. If you were working in Arkansas, you weren't making at $7.25 an hour. You weren't making $600 a week. So they benefited, and then they got their jobs back right away. So the economy did not hit as hard, as well as the health. The pandemic did not hit as hard in red state America, you might say. But the real fundamental thing, these were like add-on impacts, the health and the economy. The real fundamental cause of the 70 million backing Trump, I think, is rooted in culture. It's rooted in white European heritage background America, especially in small town, rural, so forth, that really feel threatened. They feel threatened that, the United States is changing color in many different colors, and it's almost a majority now, especially young people and so forth, whether it's Latinos or African Americans, or Muslims and Muslim Americans and immigrants and so forth. It's all color, and it doesn't matter. It's not lily white. It's not European. It's not European culture. You see, and they were the dominant race, class, whatever. And they see the writing on the wall that it's becoming more diverse. It's going to change, and they're terrified. And you got clever politicians on the right who have come along and who are preying upon that fear, that gut level instinctive fear, and telling them, oh, these people are going to take your jobs. Oh, these people are going to take your guns. Oh, these people are going to change your religion, etc. They're falling for it. They've been falling for it. And the intensity of that manipulation, ideological manipulation, has increased manyfold over the last 25 years. It kind of started in the 90s, particularly with Newt Gingrich, and then it intensified with the Tea Party, and then it intensified really further with that real opportunist politician called Donald Trump, who will say and do anything as long as he can stay in power. As he said himself, I can shoot someone on the street here in front of the White House and my people would still support me. Well, of course, they'll still support him because they see Donald Trump, and this is the fundamental thing, they see him as the bulwark against the growing diversity and color of America. And they don't care what he does. They don't care how much of a misogynist he is. They don't care if he says, soldiers who fought in Vietnam were losers. They don't care. They don't care if he puts kids in separates them from their families and puts them in cages. They don't care. They're ignoring that because they have this great fear. And he is the bulwark. He's the wall. The real wall is Trump standing between white European heritage America and the rest of us. That's the real wall. And that's fundamentally why I think they support him and will continue to support him. If Trump loses this election, it's not over. Trumpism, whatever you want to call it, is still here. And, let's say we have a scenario where Trump actually is thrown out of the White House, which isn't guaranteed at this point. On January 21st, he's going to start running for president again. And he's going to make sure that the rest of the party stays in line behind him. And he'll threaten anybody in office or out of office who's Republican who don't toe his line. He's going to be the gray eminence here behind everything, starting on January 21st. He's not going away, and
I don't think he's going away. I don't think he's going away.
And certainly his 70 million is not going away. So we're in for a period here, and he will do anything to have a scorched earth between now and January 20th for Biden, and they will continue. They will continue scorched earth policies. The Democrats, I believe, will try this bipartisan nonsense again. And Mitch McConnell, his boy and Trump's boy in the Senate, will continue his obstacle to anything to just make the Democrats look bad and come back in 2022 and retake Congress and then try to retake once again and the presidency in 2024. And it will be the same fight, even more intense, I think, by 2022 and 2024.
I do think Trump, he's not going away anytime soon. I think he definitely wants his media empire more than he wants a presidency. I think he's too much of a narcissist, and this is just maybe fantasy. I think that he deep down in the deeper regions of that little mind of his, he understands how royally he's effed up and how really out of place he is in the position. And I feel like he'd rather just, run his media empire, his OAN, his version of Fox News, whatever the hell it is, and then control politics from there, be like this puppet master from there, because you're right, 70 million isn't going away. And I don't know what the next Trump-like person is going to look like. I said it before, and I've read at least 5 different pieces on it, that what you get after Trump is going to be way worse. And I think I even talked about it than what you have with Trump, because Trump has no ideology whatsoever other than me, right? Me, and some crazy wrestling bullshit. You know, it's pro wrestling all the time with that guy. But his base is what I think scares a lot of people. And there's something to be said about the partisan lines that people drew, and the candidates the Democratic Party keeps running, to the point where Republicans that may not like Trump just despise Biden that much more. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think I'm not so sure that they aren't more fearful of Trump than they are find the Democrats despicable. I think the fear of Trump is greater than I mean, they would rather not be controlled, you know, which they wouldn't be by despising your opponent. The opponent doesn't control you, but Trump controls them, you see. And I don't think they like that. Unless they're trying to rise on his coattails, you know, by just sucking up to him, what a lot of them do. So I don't know. You know, your scenario is feasible, that he's going through all this so that he can protect his economic empire, because certainly all they have to do is reveal his tax fraud, and it's all over for him. His empire collapses at that point, and for his family and everything. Right, it's gone, pretty much. I would say, if he gets indicted for tax fraud, which he's very indictable, I think. we will see. But I mean, come on, and you know, a guy pays $750 in taxes for 2 years. Now, a lot of that's legal. You know, I'm sure a lot of his tax avoidance is quite legal, especially for the commercial real estate industry. They got all kinds of loopholes that would boggle your mind here. But I still think this guy is always pushing the envelope and going over the cliff. I'm sure he's engaged in some funny money deals.
I believe it in my soul. We have a few comments and questions so far. I don't want to say, if I'm saying your name wrong, please tell me I'm saying it wrong, and I'll try my best to pronounce it the right way. Good. Sergey Akira Hino says, good point, although from what I've heard, service sector still suffered all over from the earlier point about the economic downturn from the red states. Did you want to answer that at all? Or?
Yeah, to some extent that's true, but if you look at the relative unemployment rates in the various states, the red states far less unemployment. Of course, it wasn't the bottom level unemployment before the pandemic, but certainly certain kinds of services have been impacted everywhere. I mean, if you're running a movie theater chain, or you're running a regional airline, you're going to be impacted. What's happening wherever you are, right? But it's still quite relative, because those service industries opened up pretty quick in the red states, like Florida and places like that. They didn't stay closed very long. So I would say, there's probably service unemployment impact. Certainly the evictions, the moratorium, people were able to rental. They were able to take some advantage of the forbearance in the CARES Act, the Federal March CARES Act. But a lot of states just ignored it. The red states, and people were evicted anyway. And now, of course, the eviction really is running rampant now. It's going through the process of the 30, 60, 90 days, and people are going to be thrown out, a lot of them in the winter, from their homes. And Trump came out with an executive order.
Which was bullshit.
It was bullshit, yeah. Know what it really said, if you read it, and I read all those executive orders back in August, and it really said, we recommend to the governors that they extend to the end of the year the moratorium. Well, they just ignored it. We recommend. And that was, kind of like the payroll tax cut, right? Payroll
Mm-hmm.
tax cut. What did he do there? He said, okay, you can defer your payroll taxes. You don't have to pay your payroll tax for the rest of this year, but you're going to have to pay double payroll tax next year, right?
Yeah.
Pay double.
Yeah.
What a deal. All right. And then, of course, the $600 supplemental unemployment benefit that ended on August 1st, right? He said, okay, we're gonna provide $300. Well, for 5 or 6 weeks, I think it lasted, and they took the money from the disaster relief fund. So he's just moving money around, and that's all. And he knew that, but that was his way of breaking off the negotiations with the Democrats and preventing a deal. He never really wanted a deal in the first place from the very beginning, and he still doesn't want a deal. And all this talk right before the election about, we agree with Nancy Pelosi for, we're at 1.8 trillion and you're at 2 trillion. And then he knew it would not happen because Mitch McConnell, who's boy in the Senate, said, no way are we going to approve that. So he knew it would be shot down in the Senate, so he could say whatever he wanted before the election. He knew nothing would happen, unless, of course, Pelosi just fell for his trick and, made another big move. But fortunately, she wasn't that naive, and she didn't fall for that. Although she fell for it back in August, you see.
Yeah.
The Democrats were at 3 trillion, and the Republicans were at 500 billion, I think it was. And Nancy reduced her proposal by $1 trillion to 2 trillion, thinking that, the Trump, this guy Meadows, his chief of staff for Trump, would reciprocate and come up. Well, that's when he broke off the negotiation.
Yeah. No.
So it was all bargaining in bad faith. I worked many years for unions and was a negotiator, contract negotiator, strike leader, and so forth. And boy, I knew exactly when I saw that coming. We used to call it sandbagging. She got herself sandbagged. So it was pretty clear.
We have another comment from 40 Ounce to Freedom on Twitch. Spot on analysis. The Eurocentric white middle Americans are scared that their so-called culture, LOL, and way of life is going to end. Ashley Costa Fleck. Hey, Ashley. I hear Trump is in the works of his own television network. I'd heard that too. 40 Ounce to Freedom says he wants to be seen as strong more than anything. Yeah, I agree with that. Ashley then says there is assumption that the Democratic Party will dim Biden as to ill serve as president, and VP Kamala Harris will shortly become president after inauguration. Ooh, I'm a little confused. I think there were some typos on that one.
Yeah, well, those are some of the rumors going around, and they may turn out to be true. But I don't think Biden, unless he has some real medical issue, and at his age, of course, in 4 years he could, that there's a plan to move him out, and because the big corporate.
Oh, she's saying, now I get it. She's saying Biden's too ill, and Kamala Harris is going to be the president.
No, I don't think so. Because look, who selected Biden? Who selected Biden? Well, it was the corporate wing, the money bag wing of the Democratic Party. When the time was right, they struck, and they made their move in South Carolina in the primary there.
Oh.
And they pushed, Sanders aside, and the others quickly dropped out. Buttigieg and some of the others. Klobuchar, they quickly threw their support behind Biden, and Biden was the select candidate from the very beginning, and they just waited for the right timing. They've done this before, and the corporate wing, the money bag wing of the Democratic Party really runs the policy of that party. And I don't think they would ever push Biden away because, Biden is one of them, and Biden and they will do what they think is best. And I'm kind of worried that, should Biden get in, certainly be an improvement over Trump. We wouldn't have to worry about whether we'd have a democracy next Thursday. But certainly, it's going to be a minimalist program, economic program. It's not going to be sufficient enough. Because they'll argue, look, the Republicans have the Senate and we didn't really win in the House, and that we don't have a clear mandate. We have to go slow, and we can't. We got to find grounds to come together with the Republicans, and the Republicans are going to say, don't spend anything because of the deficit, and it'll be. I fear that it will not be sufficient fiscal stimulus to really put an end to the economic crisis that's now deepening here in the fourth quarter. And as a result of this terrible COVID wave that's coming, they're talking about 150,000 more deaths by Christmas. This COVID wave is going to make the economy even worse. And he's going to come to office with a mess. It's going to be very difficult. It's going to take some very dramatic, strong action. But if he doesn't have the Senate, he's not going to be able to do it. And the corporate wing is going to say, oh, look, you got to pare down what your demands are here. You can't let the squad come in and Sanders come in and Warren come in and tell you what to do. You're going to have to listen to cooler heads, which is, the people who paid for your campaign.
Now, moving away from Trump and all the fears of what he can and can't do. Let's talk a little bit about what we might expect from a Biden administration. Now, I saw a post on Twitter. Do you know Professor Harvey J.K. or know of him? He's been talking about not wanting Bernie Sanders to take a position in the cabinet and stay on the Senate because he feels that we need his voice in the Senate more than we need him with a role in Biden's cabinet. And I've definitely seen some projections of what Biden's cabinet would look like, which is like full of all these like Republicans and heads of corporations. And it's rumored that Bernie is trying to get a Department of Labor position as the head of Department of Labor. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, and Elizabeth Warren's trying to get Treasury,
I don't mind Warren with the Treasury.
Yeah, I don't think either of them have a chance. I think those positions have already been decided on.
Mm-hmm.
And look at the advisors who will probably be at Biden's elbow here. Larry Summers coming back.
That was so horrible.
Robert Rubin coming back.
Can he at least bring Robert Reich back? I mean, at least that guy.
No, he's too far left.
That's not even saying much.
Yeah, no, he's on the right shoulder of Bernie Sanders there.
So, are you saying that because he's a small man?
No. No, I meant that
I know
just to the right of Bernie. Just to the right of Bernie. He's got some good positions. He's on policies and so forth. So it's those kind of people that it's the best you could expect from a Democratic Party administration, but they won't be there. They won't be there at all. I think it's already been determined. This Larry Summers was the guy who Obama brought in right away. And when Obama first came into office, they were debating how much they would need to stimulate the economy, and the Congress wanted to spend $1 trillion, and advisors, well, not official advisors, but economists like Paul Krugman said, "Oh, we need $1.5 trillion spending, to stimulate the economy." And Larry Summers told Obama, he says, "No, we can't even spend that much." So they took out the consumer tax cuts of $200 billion out of the initial proposal, and ended up with the $787 billion, $300 billion of which was tax cuts, which didn't have any effect. $288 billion of which was give the money to the states so that they could spend it right away, and they held it. They didn't spend it. And then infrastructure spending, which was really capital intensive and long term, And that's why it took 5 years, 6 years to get the jobs back. We just did not spend enough. We spent 5% of GDP at that time, which was not sufficient. China spent 16% of GDP and boom, got right out of the funk, in the real economy. And so
And
far.
didn't they invest in a bunch of infrastructure projects as well in China?
Big time, immediately. But we didn't, you see. But how do you explain then that the banks got bailed out in 1 year? Well, because Congress didn't bail out the banks. The Federal Reserve, the central bank, bails out the banks. That's the way they got it set up. Spent $4 trillion bailing out the banks immediately. And within a year, they were totally recovered, the bankers, okay, or less than a year. But the rest of us took like 5-6 years because the policies really didn't create jobs the way they were supposed to. And then the jobs that were created were lower paid. We lost a lot of higher paying jobs, and the jobs that came back, this is all documented, were lower wage per hour jobs. A lot of contingent, part-time temp jobs, a lot of gig jobs started, and so forth. So it took a lot longer. And for a lot of the country, a lot of folks never really fully recovered from 2008-9 when this thing hit. And this contraction is 4 times deeper. And how much longer is it going to take to bring back those at least 25 million jobs, 25, 30 million people still unemployed? Not the 10 million they're talking about with official government figures. That's only full-time workers who lost their job. That's all. It doesn't count part-time. It doesn't count temp workers. It doesn't count gig workers. There's 23 million people getting unemployment benefits. They're saying 10 million unemployed, but there's 23 million getting benefits. Well, wait a minute. You don't get benefits unless you're unemployed,
So you're saying the numbers might be skewed.
No, well, you can cherry pick whatever numbers you want.
If you can turn your computer down, there was an echo. Now it's gone. It's gone now. So also in California, we had a proposition that I have been rallying against vehemently. Proposition 22 passed. Speaking of labor and employment, which keeps the contractor status for gig workers. The whole proposition was written to kind of override worker protections, and that passed. And now that those companies, Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Postmates, invested $180 million in striking down labor protections, and now they're talking about taking this all over the country.
Right.
So Biden is not only stepping into the COVID mess, you also have this huge, labor issue that I don't think people really understand. Do you want to get into that a little bit, or can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's the next step after this whole trend that began in the 90s under Bill Clinton of what's called contingent labor. Contingent labor, normal jobs, you work for a company, right? You have certain rights under the labor code in California. You may have a union contract. You're guaranteed overtime pay, a certain amount, certain benefits, leave, and so forth. And you have a certain relationship. The employer has certain obligations to you under law and under your contract if you have one. Right? Well, that began to change dramatically. Businesses found a way of undermining that, and that way was to hire people on a part-time basis. Hire 2 part-time people. You don't pay either of them any fringe benefits, health benefits. Save a lot of money that way, right? No pensions. Or on a temp basis, you go to a temp agency and you pay the temp agency and they pay you. And those numbers rose dramatically in the 90s. At some point, we had like 40 million people who were contingent, and they had a couple reports and studies on it. under Clinton, and the evidence was so damning that they just shut those studies down when George W. Bush came in office. So that undermining, and by the way, if you were a contingent, you couldn't be in the bargaining unit for a union, even though you're in the same. You're in a different category, and you're not part of the bargaining unit, right? Particularly if you were part-time of some kind. Or temp, very on call, kind of workers. Now, what happened in by the time we get into 2005, 2010, we find a rise of the gig worker, okay, and that's a little bit different because the gig worker, you have again even a different relationship to the employer. You're an independent contractor. They hire you as a contractor. You got no labor rights at all. As a contractor, they can fire a contractor anytime. There's no contract or anything, and you got no benefits whatsoever. Right? And under the labor code, you weren't even covered until they passed. I think it was AB 5 law in California. It gave you some coverage under labor law, but that is even worse than contingency. You see, gig is even worse in terms of your rights and your ability to negotiate some benefits and so forth. Well, what I heard that Uber, Lyft had spent over 220 million. I don't know. It doesn't matter. 220 million, and very slick campaign, right? And they really said, they had people saying, we're going to give benefits, all right? We're going to give them benefits. In their TV ads and so forth, and they brought on a lot of minority folks who needed
the NAACP was a co-sponsor.
Yeah, that's a trend. The gig worker is a trend, and there's millions of them. The government data doesn't show them because the government data only counts gig workers if it's your primary full-time job. You see. They don't count it if it's your secondary job. And that's what people have had to do. They've had to cobble together, 2 and 3 jobs sometimes, part-time jobs, in order to make ends meet. But something even worse is coming, and that's artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is going to eliminate a lot of service jobs, a lot of service jobs where there's minimal decision making involved. That's what AI is really about. It's having machines make the decisions for simple decisions where you don't have to then have a human being making the decision. McKinsey Consultants put out a study a couple of years ago that said by 2028, 30% of all the occupations in this country would be negatively impacted in terms of hours or even jobs as a result of AI. So we have now this third wave coming where the capitalists have figured out how not to use labor or to pay labor less. And it's wave after wave. They're very clever, and they're very good at coming up with new ways and means that has nothing really to do with the Congress and the legislation. You see, this is going on at the production level, you might say. Changes in capitalism at the production level. While at the same time, at the state level, you got tax legislation that's shifting money and income. You got the destruction of pensions going on. You've got all kinds of other legal developments in trade, right? And in interest rates and monetary policy. It's like you got 2 levels of how they're figuring out how to change the system to pull more income to themselves and away from everybody else. So watch out for AI. AI is going to be as devastating as gig and as devastating more so than contingent labor was before it.
Well, we have a question for you here on Twitch from 40 Ounce to Freedom. Dr. Jack, how can America get more unions involved or implemented? I realize capitalists do not want them in the workplace, but how can we force them? Education of the workforce?
Well, I don't think you really need to educate people because like 77% or some, incredible number of people when they're interviewed want unions. Yeah, and we only have 10% organized in this country, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that's the result of destroying the unions through various ways that I talked about in my book and so forth. But you know, you don't need to teach people to convince them. In fact, if you got to go and convince people they want a union, uh, don't waste your time. You know, I was a union organizer for a dozen years, and I found out that you know, if you got to really argue and convince them they want a union, go somewhere else, and you'll talk to people who you don't want who don't need convincing. And I think people today, particularly young people, under 30, 35, you know, working these indentured service jobs, part-time temp jobs, gig jobs, cobbling things together with no future, no prospect of the future, you know, living, you know, sharing rooms and everything with everyone else. You know, it's the millennials and the Gen Zers. These are the people who are taking it in the neck. These are the people who are really being negatively impacted by what's going on, far more than you know, the 50 and above. They're in Fat City. Those folks, pretty much.
You know, working in a non-union environment. I worked in the Gulf of Mexico, very non-union environment. You didn't even say the word union.
You're out if you say the word union. Yeah.
And not out like you got a boat, like maybe you accidentally fell off the rig. And they did another thing that I had never seen before, which was import labor from the Philippines, and the slave-like conditions that they're in. It really did blow my mind. I was on a podcast earlier today, and someone asked me when I got radicalized. I didn't really have an answer because I don't really remember, but I do remember, you know, talking to you about unions and organizing, and the question that came in about unions. I definitely remember that time in the Gulf, and these guys had to live, you know, because they're from the Philippines, and they work with an organization that works with your employer to get you a work visa, and then you pay that organization in your home country a fee, and then by the time you land in the States, you're just getting bombarded with charges just to be working, to the point where I remember this, and I'll never forget this. I remember seeing a grown-ass man crying in the galley holding a check for $81, and he had been in the water for like 2.5 months, and you're only supposed to be there for no more than 6 weeks, and he was there for 2.5 months with an $80 check, because all the fees, quote unquote, they had taken out of his check. So
it's a form of indentureship, you know, which is that close to slavery. You know, it's like slavery with a time limit on it. You know? That's what indentureship is, right? They own your labor and can do anything they want and tell you what they want to do for a period of time until you work off what you owe them. But in some of these cases, they never get to work it off, you know. And I've seen that before. That's not new. You know, particularly with the Philippines, you know, they bring over, or they work with a foreman who brings people from his village over, and they have an arrangement, and the people do whatever their foreman wants, and the foreman does whatever the company wants, because that's his way up and out, you see. So this has been going on a long time, and you know, it's kind of like the new form of the company town, you know, that kind of exploitation.
I do have to read this because this is the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life. This person named Michael Jason says, "Hey, this whole thing is a hoax. They declared themselves a wartime administration, and they went through the continuity of government procedures which canceled the election. Okay, now they just had a fake election. Both sides are in on it. Now they have everyone believing they're going to do a coup, but it's all a hoax. They're setting up Trump as the false fake messiah. Open your eyes." This is a QAnon free zone, just so you know.
Well, I think a more accurate description of what's going on is you got two wings of the capitalist party, the corporate party of America. Two wings, you know, there's not two parties, there's two wings, and they trade off. They trade off with each other periodically, but then now they're at war with each other. You know, the two wings, the understandings of how they would operate are breaking down. And that's because you get a wild cowboy coming in there like Trump, who is changing the equation,
Yeah.
and he is whipping up some of the folks and getting them pretty much indebted and aligned with him personally. And that's not how you play the game, to the other side, the Democrats, to say, wait a minute, you're breaking the rules of the game, the protocols and so forth. We understanding, you're supposed to leave. When we win, we're supposed to trade off. So, and Trump is saying, well, wait a minute, I didn't get two shots at this. I don't trade off until I get another shot. Uh, so I think that's a better way of understanding it. I don't think it's a hoax. I don't think it's totally managed here and going through the motions for everyone else. I think it's a real fight between them. And one side is, going for the juggler, and the other side is beginning to figure out, well, maybe we should do the same.
This is kind of funny. Next, Trump will be head wounded and Mike sworn in as president. Then a few days later, Trump shows up alive and well, and Mike hands over power back to Trump. Well, no, I don't think that's going to happen, but it is funny. They're not flicking joking. Well, I am, so deal with it.
I don't think they have to do that. I don't think they have to be that clever.
But that's so. In all seriousness, now this is my issue, and I feel like this is why we get into a lot of the situations we're in now with people not understanding. There's so many movies that we can reference where there's these just deep fakes and all this crazy espionage. And not to say the deep state isn't real, but I don't think this administration is that clever.
Well, not according to some of the statements of Donald Trump. I mean, if Donald Trump was really clever, he wouldn't be sticking his shoe in his mouth that often. You could imagine how effective a Trump could have been without his big mouth, right? I mean,
oh yeah,
it would have really been dangerous. I mean, he would not have lost this election here if it were someone who had the same objectives and the same intentions, the same goals, but had a different voice. Sometimes he's his own worst enemy. And
Donald Trump. Oh yeah, definitely. I've never seen a president in my life, and I've been asking people this, and I'll ask you this, Dr. Jack. You got me on a couple of years. In your lifetime, have you ever seen a president act this way and throw this level of tantrum constantly?
No. This is a new phenomenon here that we have, but it's the culmination of a trend. If you look at it, going on since Ronald Reagan comes into office, and he says government is the problem, right? Not the solution.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately people were turned against government, and that intensified when Newt Gingrich took over the House of Representatives in the early 90s. A lot of this begins with Newt. And, he says publicly, the whole objective we have in coming, into office here now as the majority is to make the government dysfunctional. We want the government to fail so that people get angry and so that we can mobilize them to our political objectives. So, he did a pretty good job of that. And then the Tea Party comes along, takes it to another level. And particularly at state and local government level, but who's behind these folks? It's very big money is behind these folks. It's the Koch brothers, it's the Mercer family, it's the Adelsons, it's the Singers. All these big capitalists are behind the scenes, funneling the financial means for these movements here, and providing for Donald Trump too. They're behind Trump. And it's just they're going to further and further extremes. It's as if their extreme policies produce even further extremes as they want to go further and further. But it's part of the crisis of neoliberal capitalism in the 21st century on the political sphere. The crisis is intensifying on the economic level. We're seeing more serious and severe recessions. We're seeing more financial instability. We're seeing more income inequality going on. We're seeing a collapse of the safety net that folks used to have. All the institutions are under stress, economic. So the political institutions are going to reflect that. And the politicians and ideas that they bring forth are going to reflect that as well. So it's all part of intensifying contradictions and intensifying internecine conflict, within classes themselves, particularly, the capitalist class, two different wings, but even, within other classes on the social level, which we see in the split in the electorate going on.
How do we begin to try to fight that? I had an interesting conversation that the episode will be up later this month with a gentleman that was in Grenada when their revolution happened, and also when the U.S. came over and invaded. And he was telling me about how the first thing was we have to educate these people so they understand their conditions that they're currently in and how to get out of them and who caused these problems.
Well, I think people know how serious their situation is. They feel it every day. You don't have to convince people a lot of people that it's just not working for them anymore. They know it. And by the way, that applies to a lot of Trump supporters as well. So they know the situation is not so great, and it's getting worse, and then their kids are going to probably have even a harder time. As far as the problem I see is organization, right? For people who are discontent and want something different and want to fight for something different, there's no vehicle to do it with. There's no organization to do it with. You certainly don't want to do it, although some get sucked in by talking about non-economic issues like, here comes the color wave is going to take your kids away. They'll fall for that. People will when they have a lack of knowing what to do, will oftentimes grab the first thing that comes along and says, here, I got an idea of what to do. But forming an independent organization, political party, grassroots party, not a party a bunch of intellectuals get together and say, hey, we're a party, Not that.
Smart guys talking about being smart.
Yeah, but I mean, real people with a real community base, with a real, following and so forth. Those folks are going to have to get together themselves and form a bigger umbrella themselves and realize that, the Republicans certainly aren't going to do it for you. And the Democrats say they're going to do it for you. But boy, when they get in, they have a lot of the same advisors, and, maybe they throw you a few crumbs, but they don't really solve your problems. You see, when times are good, a few crumbs are okay, and I don't have a problem. But when you got a crisis like we got in this country now, a few crumbs does not solve the problem. And there are those in the Democratic Party who I think really do want some fundamental change, but they're marginalized. I mean, they're the Sanders, the Warrens, and so forth, and they're not going to get heard. They're not going to let them run that party. So people have to really realize that you got to do it yourself. You can't look to white men on white horses or anybody on a white horse. Anybody on a white horse. It's not the guy's white; it's the white horse that's the problem. You see, you know what I mean? It's not your organization; it's their organization. Right? You need a different color horse to ride. You need your own horse to ride. right?
Ashley says, in my opinion, the masses are asleep. They think about it, but don't know the source of the issue, which is the system.
Well, I'm not so sure they're all asleep, you see.
Hmm.
I think a lot of them have awakened, but they don't know where to turn. They don't see, where can I go to do something other than vote for some one or the other, right?
Well, that becomes the message, right? Voting is going to set you free.
Well, voting is an important part of democracy, but it's not the only part. Voting is kind of like a veto. That's all voting is, right? When you don't like this guy, you vote for this guy. And once you vote for him and he's in, well, you can't do anything about it, right? And it's whoever paid for his campaign is going to have his ear. Right? So, I'm really a big advocate of independent politics, that people have to come together and form their own political organizations, and those who are leading smaller movements, or even larger movements, have to really understand that they got to come together with other people. You got to stop being a big fish in a little pond and agree to be a smaller fish in a bigger pond, right? If you want to get something really done. But I think people are moving in that direction. I really do. I think this is the Democrats' last chance. And if they can't do something here, I think an independent political organization, an alternative, is on the agenda.
I was gonna follow up with that. Fisco Drools on Facebook says people for people, community based. That's the start, and it's a hard start. But you're correct, Uncle Dr. Jack.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not going to be easy, and boy, this is going to be an interesting decade. If you thought the last decade was interesting, I really believe, by the middle of the decade, this country is either going to go progressive in some matter, or it's going to go neo-fascist in some matter.
It's interesting to see, and that's what I wanted to ask you. And this person keeps going. It's really funny. What we're seeing is a false political version of God's plan. I don't know which God you're talking about and which plan that would be.
Well, I've never met God, let alone heard his plan. So
no, I haven't. He doesn't have a 5-point plan. It depends on your God.
In the meantime, not knowing what he wants, I think we just got to figure out what we want.
I think God would want that. That's part of his plan. That is point number 3.
Bless you.
What I see, what I see is the squad did get bigger. The squad, and I'm excited about that. DSA won like 75% of their elections, so that makes me excited. And to your point about maybe we're seeing a new party, maybe we start to see a break off of the Democratic Party for once and for all, and we really do get a progressive people party. It's not like it hasn't happened before. And it's not like we don't have a lot of examples of it throughout the world, right? Lula and the Workers' Party in Brazil, Castro in Cuba. I mean, you're the professor. I'm sure you have more examples than me.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible we may see a major political realignment here this next decade. And it can come on both the left and the right. I mean, it's not impossible that the Republican Party might split too. It all depends if those establishment Republicans try to take back their party from Trump. Then you will see a real split going on. Trump will form his own party with his own followers. So you could have a split on the right. I don't think that'll happen before 2024, but you could see that happening on the left as the Sanders idea of we work inside and outside the Democratic Party. We do both. Sanders working inside and trying to move into progressive direction, and then you have the Our Revolution group, working outside the Sanders breaks outside, trying to organize on both sides of the left wing of the Democratic Party. But I think at some point people will realize that you can't reform the party, the Democratic Party, as long as the corporate money bags maintain control. That's the Democratic Leadership Conference that runs it and has run it since Bill Clinton, right? That there's no way they're going to allow really progressive, FDR-like even
No.
policy.
No.
They're not going to allow even that. So Bernie Sanders, thought that they would allow him to be the candidate, and they didn't. And then he thought they would allow him to change the platform of the Democratic Party, and he couldn't. And now he thinks that they'll allow him in a cabinet position, and they won't. You know? So that kind of sums up the inside-outside strategy, I think. But they're playing a role there, I think, of keeping certain ideas alive. Um, but I don't see the progressive wing of the Democratic Party really having all that much influence on where the Democratic Party is going, especially in after this election. When they couldn't win any more seats in the House, and they didn't win any more seats.
They didn't win any more seats, Dr. Jack. But you have to admit, though, the people that ran on like truly progressive tickets in those swing states did win.
Yes.
So like Amy McGrath didn't win, right? The Trump Democrat, whatever the hell that is. And I think Charles Booker would have gave Mitch McConnell much more of a run for his money than Amy McGrath would have.
I think they wasted a lot of money on that race and some other races. Just think if they had put that money in Georgia and listened to Stacey Abrams and said, "Hey, we can win these Senate seats," and they ignored her. They didn't give her much support during her run for governor.
No.
But just think if they hadn't wasted money. The Democratic Party strategists are not all that sharp, I don't think.
Well, didn't Chuck Rocha pretty much, for all you guys don't know, Chuck Rocha is what would you call him?
I don't know.
Democratic. He's the guy that gets all the Latin vote. He got the Latin vote for Bernie. I forget what it's called, but he had a whole organization of Latin people for Bernie, and he was basically about to hand Biden the Latin vote, and they went with another person. What was her name? Anna Navarro, to try to rally the Latin vote, and they didn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in Texas, in that one district that's like predominantly Latin in Southeast Texas. They didn't get it. And you got some comments. 40 Ounce to Freedom said, well, first of all, Ann New on YouTube says, once Trump called out military industrial complex, he was finished. Coup d'etat was done against him. And 40 Ounce to Freedom on Twitch says, I would love to agree with you, Dr. Jack, about the new parties, but the Green Party didn't get nearly the votes people thought. I see something like the Movement for a People's Party eventually strengthening, but is it possible to take down corporatists without playing their own game?
Well, the problem with the Green Party, it doesn't have much of a base except among middle-class intellectuals. That's a problem.
Very true.
It doesn't have a base really in the youth, or it doesn't have a base in the minority communities, right? Geographically, it's the urban centers, that kind of thing. So, you can't really use that as an example. People's Party, I think the jury is still out here. I'm a little nervous that it's a top-down intellectual kind of a thing.
It's feeling that way.
And, where are the real people? And maybe they think that they'll bring them on at some point.
When it's okay for them to come out.
So I don't see the organization, independent organization yet. But don't underestimate the conditions that are going to get worse, and don't underestimate. I think young folks, millennials and Gen Zers and so forth. They're showing a lot of energy, a lot of determination, a lot of courage in many ways. They're sometimes not too smart about how they go about it, but you got to admire them. And I have a lot of hope for young folks doing what needs to be done at some point, and they will educate themselves along the way, I think. And I wouldn't count them out, and they are going to be a majority very soon.
I did a show with a young man, maybe you know him, Chris Smalls. He's the gentleman that did the strike against Amazon. He had the big walkout against Amazon, and Jeff Bezos had the meeting about him, and they were trying to paint him as this idiot. And he's been able to create a real movement and bring a lot of attention to the conditions, not just in Amazon warehouses, but kind of for working people in general. And if you guys have listened to the show with Chris and I call Chris a friend now. I respect him and appreciate him and love what he's doing, because he's going out and literally trying to organize the working class. He comes from the working class. He's from the hood part of Jersey, and him describing his work environment is like so many work environments that I have coming from Richmond, California and Oakland, California. So it is frustrating, to your point, to see these movements that kind of stem from intellectuals, and it almost feels like it's the hot thing for smart people to do, and they can talk about the poor and the working class, but do they really want to involve the poor and the working class? I mean, the poor and the working class doesn't have the Twitter followers, right?
If they can tell them what they need to do,
Mm-hmm.
then they want to involve them. But it's got to be the other round. It's got to be people with a real movements behind them, real people behind them, telling the intellectuals what to do. And you got to have an organization to do this. I mean, everybody is fighting in their own single issues. Single issueism is the bane of American progressive politics. Everybody's got a single issue, right? Well, those single issue folks have got to come together. They got to come together under a new program, and new ideology or whatever, a new organization. And until they do, they don't need to divide and conquer you, because you're already divided. When you go after a single issue,
No, you're right. You're right. I agree with that 100%. Ashley Costaflex says, thank you so much for your input, Dr. Jack.
Well, thank you, Ashley.
You are appreciated on this chat and on this show. And that's kind of my fear as well, too, that so many people get caught up in their issue and they forget the word solidarity, and they forget that we kind of have to work together if we do want to really do anything. Like saying revolution and hashtagging it and throwing a brick at a cop may be cool for a minute, but does not that a movement make, right? It's like that's more spectacle than it is a real deal movement that's enacting some real deal change.
Absolutely. But I'm optimistic. I really am. About young folks. When I say young folks, I mean 35 and below. Those are young folks. Really, because the pressure's on them. The pressure's on them, and it's their life. They got their life in front of them, and if they don't change it, their life's going to be miserable. So I think they will. I really do. But the key is, can they form a unifying organization that's independent of the two wings of the corporate party of America? That's going to be the key. Right?
Well, I share your faith, Dr. Jack. I share your faith, because that's all I have at this point is faith/hope. Is there anything else you want to promote or talk about before we go?
No, I think we ended on the most important issue, the organization question. So I think I'll just leave it.
Oh, look at that. That's an OG for you right there. On the screen is Dr. Jack's website, which has links to his writing. Do you write, is it daily or weekly?
Well, I daily, I have 2 or 3 Twitter tweets on issues of the day, political and economic. I try to debunk a lot of the fake statistics and programs that come up. So follow me on Twitter at Dr. Jack Rasmus, and then about weekly I post a written article on my blog jackrasmus.com, or I post radio interviews. I do several a week, and then my own radio show, Alternative Visions, which is on the Progressive Radio Network out of New York. Every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And you can go to podbean.com, alternativevisions.podbean.com, where the podcast is put up after, if you can't make the Friday at that time. So, between the Alternative Visions show and my blog and my tweets, I'm pretty much staying up on what's happening. And then if you really want to get into some deeper stuff, my books and my longer presentations, which are on my website, which you can get to by the blog roll from the blog. You can get to my website, as well as you can get from the blog to my radio show from there. So that's where I am, and that's I'm just throwing it out there and playing maybe a little role, helping people along. I've been through decades of this. This isn't new. I started out in the union movement, working as an organizer for several different unions, and then elected local union president, negotiating and strike leading and so forth. In fact, you're in Oakland, and you're probably too young, but we had a real punch up there in Oakland in the 70s with the cable TV workers, 6-month strike. That was a good one.
Yeah, I was born in 77.
Teleprompter cable, yeah. So anyway,
my family stole cable.
No, during the strike, they probably got it for free from the strikers.
I don't know how we got it, but I know sometimes it'd be on and sometimes it would not.
Yeah. Okay. Enough said. Right. Okay. So, all right. Well, I enjoy talking with you. You're a real person there.
Hey, I love talking with you, and thank you so much, Dr. Jack, for taking the time to talk to me. Guys, thank you so much for asking Dr. Jack some questions. I'll let you go, Dr. Jack. Thank you. And when the pandemic is over, I'm taking you out for breakfast.
Very well. I'll take it.
Take care.
Oh, I know where I want to go. I want to go down to Fruitvale. They got some good Latino places there for some good huevos mexicanos.
Okay, well, all right, OG. I got you. You said nothing but a word. I got you. I'll come pick you up. You're just over the hill.
Okay.
All right. Peace out, Dr. Jack. That was Dr. Jack Rasmus. The dude's fucking sick. He's a professor, actually, at St. Mary's College, not far from here. Josh Snelling says PSL has the potential to be the mass party we need. So now that I'm doing these live streams a lot more, I'm trying to get a little more organized and have shows in advance so you guys can get excited. Gloria La Riva, the presidential candidate for the PSL party, will be speaking with me next week. Next Tuesday. We're going to start a little earlier, I think around 5:30. If that changes, I will definitely put a post up. But I was speaking with Gloria La Riva about pretty much what the end of this conversation was. How do we organize real working people? Where can you find Dr. Jack's work? Well, you can find it right here on Dr. Jack's website. And he has all of the stuff that he's done. I really can't read his resume because it's hella long, and he put it in little bitty letters, and it's still hella long. He's written a shit ton of books. He's actually written plays. Interesting man. Love his take. Love that voice too. So this was a lot of fun for me. I hope it was fun for you guys. I'm very down with Vocal of Washington and LEAD of Washington State. My partner in life runs the two. All I have is faith. That's all I have. That's all I have. I'm glad you appreciate this conversation, 40 Ounce to Freedom. I do. I want to say this real quick before I wrap everything up. I was on a podcast earlier today. I was on someone else's show. In the last few weeks, I've been on a lot of different podcasts, which is like interesting and weird for me for other people to want me to be on this show. But anyway, I was on another guy's show, and I met this gentleman years ago touring, and one thing I miss is interacting with some of the people. Josh Snelling, for example, that made a comment on here. I know Josh from playing Montana. I miss it, and this is the closest I can get to interacting with you guys on a stage. So this has been a lot of fun for me, and I'm going to keep doing these live streams because unlike like the podcast is just a one-on-one conversation, very fun conversation, but it's not the same as getting bombarded with a bunch of comments and questions and jokes. 40 Ounce of Freedom says this dude really knows his shit. See, this is why I come here. Your ideas are epic, and you have people like Dr. Jack. Thank you. So definitely come back. So, okay. Because I do these podcasts, we have sometimes it's real quick. Like Dr. Jack, actually, it was really quick. We didn't have a lot of like ice break time. I try to have 30 minutes before, like break the ice, them get to know me. You know, everybody's comfortable. We didn't have a lot of time, but we did the show, and then we talked for a while afterwards. Recently, a show that's coming up, I want to say on the 18th of November, it should be dropping. I had Torrey Reed, who wrote a book I really enjoy called Towards Freedom. And if you don't know Torrey, you might know his dad, Adolph Reed. So anyway, Torrey and I and Cedric Johnson, who's also been a guest on the show, we've kind of got a bit of a friendship going. And me and Torrey talked, no lie, probably 4 hours, and definitely me and Cedric talked about the same amount of time. And one of the things we talked about was kind of the racist right-wing themes in movies like Boys in the Hood. And the other night, Fisk, it's all love. This pandemic will be over, and I'll be up north, though. It's nothing but a word. Yeah. Well, you know, I don't know why that is. But anyway, I'm watching. So we were having this conversation about kind of messaging that was not as progressive as people think in the 90s, especially from the Black activist community. So I sat and watched night before last. I watched Boys in the Hood. Boys in the Hood starts out, and I totally forgot this. The first line is 1 in 22 Black men will die at the hands of another Black man, or some shit. I'm totally saying the quote wrong, but it was basically black on black crime, which is the kind of the theme of the movie. And I was like, let's get on together. And so far, I got Torrey, Cedric down, Justin Hunt that hosts hip hop. What is this show called? The Company Man. He's actually got one of the biggest hip hop podcasts around. Who else is down for this conversation? I tried to get Ben Dixon in on it. It conflicted with his schedule, so we're trying to schedule another conversation with Ben Dixon. But we're going to have this big panel discussion probably in like 2 weeks about Boys in the Hood and kind of just that time frame in the 90s where the messaging that we looked at as progressive messaging at that time was just reiterating right-wing talking points. So I'm excited for that. I'm definitely excited for next Tuesday. Gloria LaRiva, I gotten to know her, and she is a wonderful human being. I tried to get Angela Walker on that one too. I'd have Gloria and Angela also conflicted, so that sucked. I'm hurt, Angela. If you're watching this, I'm hurt that it was going to be a panel with you and Gloria. I was about to get fired up. That's all right. But anyway, book recommendations, because I'm always reading something. A Brief History of Neoliberalism by David Harvey. I think it's a good book. Tomorrow I have an interview with Derek Varn, and I believe he is not a fan of David Harvey. So I need to finish this book so Derek and I can have a deeper discussion about why he doesn't like Harvey. And also, I'm in the middle of Captains of Consciousness by Stuart Ewan, Advertising and the Social Roots of Consumer Culture. Really, 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 really great book that breaks down kind of the age of consumption that we find ourselves in now. If you notice anything about me, I'm always interested in the why. Why is this way? Why is this way? And so books like this are great, in my opinion. So A Brief History of Neoliberalism and Captains of Consciousness, two great books. Definitely Dr. Jack has a really good book about neoliberalism. I think it's called From Reagan to, let me see if I can find the title of it. U.S. Economic Policy from Reagan to Bush, The Scourge of Neoliberalism. And he also has a really good book about Alexander Hamilton and the Origins of the Fed. So we have to bring Dr. Jack back on just to talk about Alexander Hamilton. And maybe I can't play music as a fan. Like, I lost a stream. So if you watch the Halloween stream, it got pulled down because I played music from the movie Trick or Treat. So that sucked. Other than that, I'm going to call it kind of early and go do dad shit. My son was here a second ago, and I guess he took off, and that makes me sad. Thank you guys for paying attention to the stuff that I do. If you feel so inclined and would like to help the show grow, become a patron. I'm finally doing the patron-only content that I said I was going to do, and I started doing it with my buddy Conan Neutron. Conan has an amazing podcast. If you're a music fan, if you're a rock music fan, called Protonic Reversal. Recently, he had Ian MacKaye on his show. He had some members of Devo on his show. Who else was on his show recently? Buzz from the Melvins was on his show. But anyway, he's also like crazy knowledgeable political guy. And he hit me up. He's like, Jason, let's do this thing real quick about what's going on with the election. And we did it. And I was like, you know what, Conan, we should like once a month do a political thing. And I'm going to do it on Patreon. And he was totally cool with it. So that's part of it. There's going to be more. I'll be doing a voiceover work tonight for the animated series Revolutionary Histories. We're starting it off with a history of the rise of China. People don't know enough about China. With the Left Click, a group of leftist animators out of Southern California. So I'm beyond excited for that. So hopefully, like, I don't know. I can't push people that are doing this kind of work. Like, hurry up. But I have to do the voiceover script that Professor Ken Hammond wrote. I saw 6 seconds of the animation and I like teared up. So super excited for that. So if you want to help the show grow, if you have the means, we really appreciate it. Become a patron. If you can drop something in a super chat, we'd really appreciate it. If not, totally understand. I'm still going to ask all the questions that I see put before me, unless they're offensive. And while I didn't agree with the religious ones, they weren't offensive. Pam Davis is here. And before I go, I have one huge favor. Pam Davis is my mother. Wonderful woman. I did a podcast about my mom and why she's so wonderful. She is an organizer. She's a fellow leftist. If you guys could wish her a happy birthday, that would be huge. A huge happy birthday to Pamela Davis. Like, that would be the bee's knees for me. If you guys could say, hey, happy birthday, Pam Davis. So there you go, Mama. I made a Facebook post about her and her birthday, and a bunch of people wished her a happy birthday. So that was pretty cool. I appreciate you guys for doing that. My mom also gets flown all over to help organize, and she's been arrested striking and fighting for 15, and she's a badass. I can't lie. I cannot lie. So happy birthday. Don't listen to No. We definitely have disagreements, and one disagreement we have is ADOS. But I love my mom immensely. It's her birthday. I'm not going to say how old she just turned, but we're not that far apart. She's a great grandma. So happy birthday to a fellow comrade. I think it's so awesome when you can call your mom comrade. And it's so awesome when you go drop off your kid and your mom's wearing like a different DSA shirt. Oh, she admits her age. So here you go. I'm going to put it up. Way to go. Bam. 63. 63 years young is Pam Davis. So one of these days we have to do a podcast with my mom, and it's probably just going to be her fussing at me for like 25 minutes before she gets frustrated and hangs up. So happy birthday again. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow very early in the morning, and I'll see you guys next week.